mention the reptiles, Dave.
Even less is said about the Grey Pope, who some believe to be the true ruling power in the Vatican.
Humans emitting a MAC address.
All of them had Bluetooth signals.
I've never seen it before.
Queuing up to transition their children.
This is the ultimate suicide cult.
What if the symbols around us every day aren't just ornamental?
We lost 1,000 years of history.
What if they're instruction?
That state of awareness is not manipulatable.
Innocence, purity, vibrant, trusting, vulnerable yet powerful, unconditional, pure love. Babies and children remind us of who we truly are at our core. Eyes wide open, curious and full of wonder. They wear no mask, just pure life energy, pure love. But somewhere in time, a darkness crept in. A certain group developed an urge to destroy the purity of our children, to steal their life force in the most unimaginable way. This reality is unbearable, too painful to grasp. The truth shatters the safety of our world, and so we look away. That feels easier, safer. Animals face danger head-on and instinctively protect their young. They confront a predator to defend what is sacred, their children. It is time we do the same and wake from the mass hypnosis. Reclaim our minds from those who prey on our children. Face the fear. Heal the wounds. Break the chain. Step out of the cycle of silence and complicity in organized crimes against children. It's about time, isn't it? This film is a call to the heart, a reminder of the innocent, fragile child that still lives within each of us. Protect that inner child, nurture it, and let it guide you back to your true essence. For your healed inner child can help heal all children. A 12-year-old boy is on his summer break. He's just finished elementary school, and after the summer he'll be starting high school. He's wondering what to do with this day and decides to head to the arcade, one of his favorite spots. He's a handsome boy with delicate features. Friends describe him as quiet, sensitive, and introverted. His parents got divorced when he was young, and classmates claim that things at home haven't been easy for him. Nevertheless, he is still a good student. But then, he disappears.
I'm an investigative journalist. I've been working under the pseudonym of Alistair. I've been investigating the power shift that is taking place right now, all sorts of forms of power abuse, and particularly organized sexual abuse of children. I've been investigating this for over 11 years.
I'm Steve van Herwegen. I'm a Belgian psychologist. I'm experienced in trauma, psychotrauma. I worked for 25 years in different types and fields of mental care. I was always intrigued by the dark and the dark tunnels in life to find the light. Because in the end, that's what always drives me, the truth, and the truth lies behind the darkness. I recommend that to everyone to not be afraid of the dark. I'm very sensitive to all types of violence, all types of aggression, all types of abuse. Why? What motivates people to do harm? How can we learn from that, and how can we heal as an individual and as a collective? The oath of Hippocrates, primum non nocere, first do no harm. I think that's a very important principle.
I'm David Icke, and I've been researching, investigating mind control techniques, satanic ritual abuse, and child abuse in general by the elite, in quotes, since the mid-1990s. And I've done this both in the United States, North America in general, Europe, and around the world. And the same story emerges wherever you look.
I often get the question why I want to dive into this very difficult topic of organized child abuse, but it is about the children. And why wouldn't we be worried that influential people are involved and that there are blackmail operations and that policymakers might be mind controlled? For me, it's not the question why I do what I do, but why are not more people standing up? I've talked to dozens and dozens of survivors and victims of organized abuse. For instance, someone that was used as a child sex slave in the village, or as a sex slave in an elite pedophile network, a doctor that stumbled upon a family where the children were involved in a local network. For instance, therapists that treat people that have been severely abused. Children that have been placed in a family with a pedophile knowingly and willingly by youth care, child protection services. It gave me a great insight in what happens behind the scene and how these networks operate, and also how it affects the people that had to endure this kind of abuse.
When you first start to grasp the nature and the extreme nature of what is happening to children, and how what we call wrongly the elite in the world, in country after country, are the perpetrators of this, then you can immediately respond by putting the hand up and saying, can't be happening, too extreme, nothing, no one is as evil as it would take to do what you're claiming.
The network is spread out, more elaborate than people expect. There are local networks, and anyone can be involved, really. It can be the shoemaker around the corner or the teacher in the school.
It took a lot of people involved. It took doctors, psychiatrists, gynecologists, dentists. All these people knew what was going on, hairstylists. I mean, the list goes on. I could keep going on and on and on. Drivers, chauffeurs, butlers, housemaids. It took all of these people turning a blind eye.
On a local level, often there are a few gatekeepers. For instance, the mayor might be involved, or someone within the police department, or the headmaster of a school, a personal primary care physician. But these local networks, they are connected to a national network. And then the national networks are connected to a global network. In the end, it is a global network. When you deal with psychopaths, they have a tendency to sort of climb up the ladder because they have no compassion, they have no empathy, they have no boundaries in their behavior. So typically within the networks where there's sadistic organized abuse involved, you find a lot of psychopaths that are often in influential positions of society.
The first time when we ever done it to a papa, the first time when we little done it, we had feared so much.
When you did what?
When we killed a baby, the first time. And
You killed the babies?
Yes.
Everything that happened on the Lolita Express and his other planes was the same thing that happened in his bedrooms, in the massage rooms, on the beach, wherever we were. The abuse did not stop because we're in the air. 95% of the time, there was always sex involved. Jeffrey couldn't take a 2-hour flight without having to ejaculate. Like, that's how sick this man was.
How did you live every day? How did you get on board that plane? How did you live knowing you're going off to New York or to the island or to wherever you were about to be trafficked to? You must have been a ball of dread and anxiety.
I was.
Throughout my childhood, I was a victim of Australia's VIP child sex trafficking ring. For example, I was prostituted to pedophile parties at Parliament House, Canberra, and to an international leader at Fairbairn Military Airport. The people involved in this elite pedophile ring included high-ranking politicians, police and judiciary.
A lot of people are born into these networks. They come from a family that have been involved for generations, so they had really no choice in the beginning of their lives, whether they were involved or not. Other people were lured in. Children that are most vulnerable, they typically get lured in. The people that are involved are often mind-controlled from a very young age, before the age of 6, because then it's most effective. And then it creates these very controllable puppets. Because of the trauma-based mind control, the mind is split off. So there are parts of the personality that can be switched on and off at will. So the loyalty is forced upon them. If you're not loyal, the punishments are really severe. In order to prove your loyalty, you have to participate in the crimes.
Er kwam een moment, toen werd ik dus uitgenodigd, daarom vertel ik dit ook, om mee te gaan doen aan offers in het buitenland. Dat was het breekpunt. Kinderen.
Oké. Dat werd je gevraagd?
Ja, ik kon het niet.
So it's not like the child is expressing its pain or fear necessarily. I mean, that can happen in a sadistic situation, but I think often these children are trained to be completely disconnected. And so they are trained to pretend it is okay. There's gatekeepers within the police department, within the justice department, political arena, child protection services. Most people that work there are good people. They have a good heart. They really want to make a change. But there are gatekeepers that make sure that whenever someone reports to the police and wants to prosecute their perpetrators, it doesn't go anywhere. It goes up to a level and then it's stopped. These are the stories I hear over and over again. When you realize that most perpetrators are broken people because they have been subjected to childhood trauma, they didn't deal with their childhood trauma in a responsible way by processing it and evolving into a better human. They choose the road on becoming the one in power. And there's this hole, this emptiness because of the trauma that they want to fill up. And one of the ways is to, when you abuse a child, you can sort of gain access to another realm, if you will. It's an energy transfer. It's stealing the life force energy of a child for a brief moment to feel, to forget basically what you had to endure.
You've got to imagine that you are a little child, and this is happening to you. Not once, systematically, day after day after day after day. And try walking away from that when you have, as I have, talked to these people later in life, in the United States, in Canada, in Europe, Australia, so many places, South Africa, and you realize it's true. Try walking away from that. I can't. Unfortunately, most people can.
When people are not familiar with satanic ritual abuse and they hear about blood drinking rituals, they think it's so absurd and fantastic that they think it's not true, but it actually makes a lot of sense. And we know that from historical pictures that it is something that has been done for thousands of years.
What were they doing in the ancient world? They were doing sacrifice rituals and child abuse rituals to these gods. And why were they doing them? It was a gift to the gods, okay. So what do the gods get out of it then? Well, as you do the research into this and the dots begin to connect and you see how the picture forms, these gods feed off low vibrational human energy.
When a child is terrorized and hurt, the body produces a very high level of adrenaline. And that adrenaline, when it's oxidized, there's a compound produced that's called adrenochrome. And it has self-healing abilities. So it's basically a reaction of the body to heal itself. When that blood is tapped off by someone else and consumed by another person, they get a sort of high, and it's also known to have healing capabilities and also has a rejuvenating effect. So it's known as an elixir.
We're going in there because we need this. Our city is counting on you to collect those children's screams. Without Scream, we have no power. Yes, it's dangerous work, and that's why I need you to be at your best.
There's a whole industry built around this, and this is very well documented. There's a stack load of documents that were leaked in 2020. And it's interesting because the hijacking and trafficking of children and abusing them in a horrible way to produce this adrenochrome is illegal, obviously. But then at a certain point, that sort of makes its way into the legal medical world. So medical institutes and companies are involved. For instance, we know from documents that adrenochrome is used in products that are used for wound healing therapies. The big pharmaceutical companies just have it on their website. So it is very well documented, maybe not always literally the blood drinking, but we know it's the most expensive and addictive drug in Hollywood. And it's very popular because it makes you look very young.
And the energy they want more than anything is the energy of children before puberty. There is a chemical change, an energetic change that happens at puberty, which changes the nature of the energetic field as you move into adulthood.
They do things like using mantras and symbols and chanting and using specific numerology, specific dates, locations to invoke spirits, demons. And if you wonder why certain policies or actions from big corporations are very inhumane, then you have to wonder, is it the human that is in control, or is it the demonic entities that are in their energy field? Everything is based in satanic ritual abuse. They need to lower the frequency as low as possible. So they use fear and despair. The spirits that come from another realm, it has to match that frequency, which is very low frequency.
What are you doing when you chant? And there's loads of these chants in this satanic ritual abuse. Vocal cords are vibrating, and the chant is turning that vibration into a particular frequency, so that what they're doing with the chants is they're creating a certain frequency field that the chant is there to elicit. The colors that they use, every color is a frequency of vibration. This is well known in mainstream science.
Can we start at the beginning and can you tell us the story of what's happened in your life from the very start?
Okay, what I can tell you is that before I started looking into my life, back in 1989, I was starting to have flashes of things, and my life was not what it seemed to be, which is why I started looking into it. And what I found out was that I had a lot of missing time, and a whole lot of missing time as to what had occurred in my life. And when I started looking into what had happened in my life, it was the only way that at the time that I knew, was to start going to see a therapist.
You know, I've talked to people who've taken part in these rituals, often against their will. They describe how the ritual is conducted in basically the same way as it was in places like Babylon, Mesopotamia, Egypt, in the ancient world, because it's designed to elicit a particular energetic outcome.
During these ceremonies, was Satan, the devil, ever referred to?
He was called Lucifer.
What did they say about the devil, about Lucifer?
That killing the people made him happy.
The boy disappears without a trace. At first, the police doesn't take it seriously and assumes he's just run away from home. But multiple witnesses repeatedly report that they've seen the boy, apparently hanging out with people involved in the scene of child pornography and child prostitution in the Netherlands. One of the suspects was arrested 2 years earlier for child trafficking, but was released because of a legal technicality. Another suspect later admits to bringing the boy over from Germany himself. Several underage East German boys who give statements to the police say they had been lured to the Netherlands under false pretenses. They were promised acting careers. It's possible the boy was also tricked into coming to the Netherlands this way. There are also several witnesses who claim that the boy's father, who was an agent of the Secret Service in the former East Germany, the Stasi, may have been involved in the disappearance. He's also mentioned in a well-known Dutch case file about a former high-profile pedophile network, where he was allegedly involved in sadomasochistic practices. And he was reportedly seen multiple times at a known bar visited by pedophiles in Prague. According to several statements, a high-ranking Dutch official was also a regular visitor in that bar. The father, however, denies any involvement and is released after a brief interrogation.
When you consider violence or different forms of different faces, different aspects of violence, it always comes down to aggression and uncontrolled aggression. But in sport, we call it grinta. You need some aggression, you need some alpha energy, you need some power to act, to create, to win. Because of the programming, due to parenting, due to education, due to schooling systems, we kind of have disconnected ourselves from our deepest aggression, deepest powers. And when we are disconnected, we're more, like we call it in stress psychology, we're fawning, we're more pleasing, we're not only fighting and flighting anymore or freezing, and that's how aggression may flourish in ourselves. Because when we are not allowing the inner powers, the inner positivity that is related to aggression, that the source of creation, we disconnect ourselves, then we will try to find, because in the end we need to survive. Where are we going to look for safety? Where are we going to look for protection? Where are we going to look for some guidance? So we need that, and when we don't develop that in ourselves, that's when the external locus of control kicks in. The locus of control that is externally, that we search for external guidance and protection, and that's how a lot of people live their lives. When people come to me with anger management issues, almost 9 out of 10 people, I have to re-educate them to say yes to their violence, inner violence, to say yes to their powers, to say yes to their anger, to say yes to their the reasons why they're angry. But we live in a society where our aggression, we have to suppress ourselves, our emotions, our feelings, our aggression. And we become numb, we become victims. But we're not victims, we're heroes to be.
Mengele came, and he decided to send me to the left and Miriam, my twin, to the right, which meant I was supposed to go to the crematorium. My sister, my elder sister, Hannah, when she realized that, she bent down on her knees and begged. She did not know that that was Mengele, and we didn't know that name before. But she begged, she said, since we were twins and we have never been departed till now, she begs him to leave us together. And when Mengele heard that we were twins, and I had already been gone towards the crematorium, and I walked, and I got quite close to the crematorium. I could see the the fire coming out through the chimneys. I could even feel the burnt flesh. Only then I began to realize that I am probably going to that place. But all of a sudden came an SS man and pulled me out of the line and brought me back to Mengele.
Programs like MK Ultra in America that was inspired by the Nazis and people like Joseph Mengele, the angel of death in the concentration camps. They use this natural amnesic response to turn the minds of children. They really want to start it. There's a lot of technology used now, but they really wanted to start it before the age of 6, while the neuron pathways are still forming, so that they can rewire them. They start with the trauma. First of all, it's violence. It's finding out the child's worst fear and then making them experience it. If they're terrified of snakes, they'll put them in a pit of snakes. If they're terrified of spiders, they'll put them in a pit of spiders. They will make them, and my God, I've heard this from so many people, they will make them watch while an animal is sacrificed and cut to pieces alive. They will make them, at a most extreme, watch and experience human sacrifice. And at that point, these kids are so terrorized, they know these people that are telling them what to do and abusing them, they ain't kidding when they're saying, if you say anything, these are the consequences. Not just for you, for your parents as well.
It's my strong conviction that we're all traumatized. Can all be put on the trauma spectrum. We didn't learn to cope with it accurately, so that makes us a bit blind, because when you're not capable of dealing with something that you're suffering from, that makes you also blind when it happens outside of you. Trauma is a reaction to an event, and a reaction is always subjective. It's never generalized, so you cannot judge. Two persons can experience the same event, and one person can, let's say, cope it accurately, and the other might develop a trauma, which is mostly referred to as a post-traumatic stress disorder. We have the fight-flight response. So can I fight the situation? No, then I will try to run away from the situation. If this is not possible, we will freeze. This is also what we see with animals. And when this is happening, we kind of shut off ourselves from our feelings. We disconnect from who we are. We disconnect from our identity. We disconnect from what is happening. We disconnect from where we are and who's with us. So we disconnect. That's a psychological defense mechanism that helps us to survive, to not fall dead. And the freezing is, of course, the third phase. And then when we kind of awaken a bit, then we start to fawn, we start to please. Probably have heard about the Stockholm syndrome, the syndrome that occurs when people who are being taken hostage fall in love with their perpetrator. This is like very difficult to understand. What motivates, what drives people to do that. Fawning can also lead to a kind of second nature. We kind of dissociate ourselves from the original experience, and we build a defense mechanism, and we build a new identity. And when the stress is only happens once, then we can kind of start with the coping. But when the stress continues and continues and never stops, we kind of give up being ourselves. So then there's a compartmentalization, difficult word, of ourselves, of our psyche, of our feeling. So it's like a puzzle that has been blown up, and all these different pieces are lying on the floor, and this is who we are. And sometimes we feel like we're connected with that part because we try to survive.
There's a mechanism in the brain that shuts out memories of extreme trauma. You'll notice that people that have a big road accident, a terrible road accident, or they're hit by a vehicle, happened to my mother, they remember up to a point, and then they remember waking up in hospital or whatever. But in between, when it actually happened, they overwhelmingly can't remember anything. This is because the mind-brain puts an amnesic barrier around the memories of extreme trauma. Why? Because you don't want to keep experiencing it.
There are even studies conducted with patients with DID disorder, where they saw that there were different personalities, and each of these personalities had their own diseases. This, of course, directly, not indirectly, directly related to forms of violence, chronic forms of abuse.
MKUltra aims to develop techniques for modifying behavior through a combination of drugs, hypnosis, and sensory deprivation. The program sought to create a Manchurian candidate, an individual who could be programmatically controlled to carry out tasks or missions.
In terms of the Manchurian candidate, the idea is to use hypnosis, drugs, fear, terror to split off part of the mind. And then you can get control of that part of the mind separately, and that part of the mind can carry out missions.
What is happening with this trauma, which they make them experience, is the mind, through the neuron pathways, but the mind is being compartmentalized into, like, imagine a honeycomb of self-contained compartments. And in the mind control trade, they call these alters, as in altered states of perception. And they create what they call in this industry a front alter. That is the personality that in the normal course of the life interacts with people and life. And not only that, that's the personality the child thinks they have. But behind the front alter are all these amnesic compartments in what we call the subconscious.
The consciousness leaves the body, and the memories are so intense that it is stored in a compartment separate in the brain. That can be activated by a certain trigger. Can be a word, can be a smell, a sound, music, and then that memory comes to the forefront. But this is a technique. I mean, it's a natural response on severe trauma for self-preservation.
I have sat in a therapist's front room, and in front of me was a woman, her name was Carol, I remember that. And she was in her 30s, and her medical history for a 30-year-old was absolutely unbelievable because of all the abuse and violence she'd suffered. And I watched this lady this therapist, who had worked with Carol for a long time. And she'd started to elicit the codes bit by bit by bit, painstakingly, that were activating the different alters compartments. And I sat there while Carol was sitting on the sofa and becoming a stream of totally different personalities, just by the codes that the therapist was giving her. So I saw a baby coming out of this 13-year-old, acting like a baby. I saw someone who was terrified. And I saw someone in this, she was a lovely lady, Carol. I saw someone come out of her, the personality, the way she suddenly acted when the codes were given, who was so fricking evil.
He also was put in an insulin coma for 36 days with a recording beside him saying that your mother hates you over and over and over and over and over.
Well, there's a lot I could not remember after I got out of the Allen. When my family came, I was a zombie. I didn't even know who they were.
So these compartments, for instance, can be then programmed with instructions, say, to assassinate someone or to go crazy with guns in a school in America. The whole modus operandi is fear. So you'll have people in the Netherlands, in the elite running the country, who will have subordinates below them, who will do what they're told. But those running the Netherlands, like those running Britain, like those running America, will be terrified of the levels above them into the cult inner core. And the cult inner core will be terrified of the gods in another dimension. The whole thing is based on fear. What is the currency of control of humans? In general, it's fear. Part of this system is to bring a back altar to the front, to be abused by the rich and famous who they would otherwise recognize, and then put the temporary front altar, the abused altar, back into the subconscious. Front altar comes forward. Front altar has no idea it's been abused. None. I've met people in America who thought they were virgins when they got married. And when eventually the compartments started to break down, they realized that they had been sexually abused by men, often rich and famous, since they were kids. The scale of the abuse stays hidden, because even a lot of the people who have been abused don't remember until the altars start to break down. To explain the origin of all this and where it came from, we really have to enter the land well beyond, enormously beyond, where most people are willing to go. Let's just do a bit of background here on the basic physics of this reality. When you look through your eyes, you are seeing a tiny, almost laughably narrow band of what exists in the space you're looking at. Science calls it visible light. Let's put that into perspective. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum, which is basically our experienced reality, is 0.005% of what exists in the universe in terms of energy in its different forms. Visible light, which is the only band of frequency that we can see, everything that that we're looking at now, everything people watching this are looking at now, exists within this tiny band of frequency called visible light. It's ridiculously narrow. Everything else that exists in the space that we are occupying is invisible to us. And yet the entirety of infinite reality in all its forms, facets, and infinity exist in the same space that I'm sitting in now. Some of these expressions of life, particularly those very close to our frequency band but beyond our ability to see them, are these expressions of pure evil. And these are the gods that were and are worshipped by people all over the world. I realized that these rich and famous people were invariably the key players, but a lot of the not so key players, but contributors. There were two common themes relating to them. One was pedophilia, and the other one was satanic ritual abuse.
It was a big year for paedophile movies. Surviving R. Kelly, Leaving Neverland, Two Popes. Shut up. Shut up. I don't care. I don't care.
People around the world are searching for the boy. His mom even appears on a Dutch crime show, hoping someone knows something. His grandmother writes an open letter distributed in the press, just trying to make contact. Mein liebe Jungen, gibt es dich noch? Das ist meine Frage an dich und auch die Frage, die wir uns alle stellen. Wo immer du auch bist, mein Wunsch ist, dass es dir gut geht, dass du nicht einsam bist. Bitte beobachte, dass ich Angst um dich habe. Ich möchte für dich da sein, wenn du mich brauchst. Sag mir, dass es dich noch gibt. Deine Omi. But no one answers.
And we are programmed. We are programmed through our parents, through our grandparents, through their grandparents. This is what we call transgenerational programming. I've worked with 3 to 4 generations of pedophiles in forensic psychiatry. And I remember a person who was sitting in front of me, who was saying to me, like, why do I have to go to a psychologist like you? We know how love works. Society doesn't know how love works. We are not wrong. You guys don't simply see it the way you should see it. In our family, this is the moral. In our family, this is normal. This is okay. So what we do unto others is just simply the continuation of how we perceived love generation after generation. There are, of course, many factors that, in my opinion, play a very important role. First of all is a lack of consciousness, a lack of awareness, a lack of emotional intelligence, a lack of spiritual intelligence, a lack of feeling, and a tendency to be loyal to those who nourished you, who educated you. So there's this loyalty that plays a lot in that process. A lack of awareness, a lack of courage, but mostly it's ignorance. According to, again, statistics, 80% of those who committing abuse to a minor, to a child, mostly also themselves being abused. I believe personally that it's more. I think it's, in my opinion, 100%. But when it comes down to responsibility, in my opinion, the perpetrators are 100% responsible. The more we are raising the awareness about this topic, the more we're working towards prevention.
child trafficking is the most profitable industry in the world. If you take the top 5 industries, oil and gas, big pharma, big tech, the weapon industry, banking, the approximate average across these industries is a 15 to 20% net profit margin. Data analysis indicate that child sex trafficking operations have a net profit margin of 70 to 95%, depending on the frequency of their exploitation, due to the near zero payments to victims. Plus, they do not pay taxes because it's illegal what they do, so the financial benefits are enormous. In the 90s, there were a number of scandals that arose in the Netherlands of organized abuse. Some of them happened in schools, believe it or not. There was really good journalism back then. There were journalists that really wanted to dive into it and published good stories. But there was always a turning point when things were getting out of hand. There was some sort of intervention, and then the investigation stopped. There was a reason propped up why everything was not true. The story was twisted, turned around, and downplayed. And a good example is the Zandvoort case, which was a large-scale child pornography collection that was busted.
Cet homme de 49 ans est apparemment chargé de la diffusion des images sur Internet. Évidemment, Marcel s'empresse d'aller au contact d'Ulrich à Zandvoort, une station balnéaire en Hollande. La rencontre s'effectue dans l'appartement même d'Ulrich le 11 juin 1998.
Ulrich était ivre ce soir-là. Il était complètement bourré. Ulrich l'a amené chez lui. Marcel a vu un appartement très luxueux, très moderne. Et 8 ordinateurs. Sur chaque ordinateur, il y a du pédoporno.
L'appartement d'Ulrich à Zandvoort semble bien être le centre du réseau. Des ordinateurs qui ne sont jamais éteints. De nombreux virements aboutissant sur un compte bancaire, nom de code Apollo, du nom du voilier d'Ulrich, sur lequel on filmait des viols de mineurs.
I've seen the police reports that stated that there were 90,000 children involved. That's quite a significant number. When you look at the media reports that started to report on it, they had no choice. They had to report on it because it was so shocking. They downplayed it and they said, oh, but most images were already existing, so it was an existing collection, and there were just a few hundred new images. And the only tabloid that really did a good report on it was Humanité, the French tabloid, and they managed to make portraits of the victims and publish that in a portrait book. And they were contacted by parents because they were looking for their missing child, or they knew their child had been abused and they wanted to find proof. And they were able to identify some parents. The journalist said there were about 80 parents, from what I remember, that identified their children. But it was always told to the parents, no, this is not your child has been identified in the Netherlands or in Belgium. And this, it looks like your child, but it is not. In the Netherlands, there were a number of reports and investigative commissions to investigate sexual abuse in schools, in sports, in child protection services, the Catholic Church, and sadistic ritual abuse. It always ended up in a thick report, press release, and then that's it. No one ever got prosecuted, no one ever went to jail. And in the case of the investigation of sadistic ritual abuse, that was a result of a resolution that was passed in Parliament in 2020. And part of that resolution was they had to investigate also the scale of it and how this network operates, how you know, it's interwoven with other things. And they refused to do that. So they neglected their parliamentary duty to do so. And instead, they just talked to a few survivors. They said up front, we're not going to investigate or search for evidence. There were interest groups that were quite involved, and they wrote several letters to Parliament and to the Commission. They said, well, we have a plan, there's technology you can use to search the dark web, and there's evidence there. There's clearly evidence, because there were therapists that treated the survivors, and they said it's my child pornography films are on the dark web. They refused to do that. And then when the report came out, the media said there's no evidence.
Nu de zaak Demmink. Al jaren gaat het verhaal dat Joris Demmink, lange tijd de hoogste ambtenaar van het ministerie van Justitie, betrokken zou zijn bij misbruik van minderjarige jongens. Nou, vandaag kwamen tijdens een zitting nieuwe feiten naar boven met mogelijk grote gevolgen.
Joris Demmink. Al jaren wordt er gespeculeerd dat deze oud-topambtenaar van Justitie betrokken was bij seksueel misbruik van minderjarige jongens. Als het klopt, zou dat grote gevolgen kunnen hebben voor het aanzien van de rechtsstaat. Lange tijd ziet het OM geen reden om Joris Demmink te vervolgen. Maar in januari besluit het Hof in Arnhem om wel een zaak tegen hem te beginnen. Hij wordt beschuldigd van het misbruiken van 2 Turkse jongens op een seksfeest in Turkije in 1996.
Een paar jaar geleden deed een 15-jarig meisje bij de politie aangifte van stelselmatige verkrachting. Gepleegd door haar vader en een netwerk van andere mannen. Hooggeplaatste mannen, ze noemden namen van advocaten, een topman van een groot bedrijf en een topambtenaar van het ministerie van Justitie, de heer Joris Demmink.
My name is Gideon van Meijeren and I'm a member of the House of Representatives in the Netherlands. In my political work I focus on several topics, and one of them is the serious problem of organized sadistic abuse of children in the Netherlands. I've been working on this issue because I think it is extremely important not only to protect the victims and the survivors, but also to make sure that the truth comes out, no matter how painful or difficult that truth may be.
Ze zou als gevolg van de verkrachtingen onder meer zwanger zijn geraakt en zijn bevallen van een baby, waarna het babytje zou zijn vermoord. Dit meisje, Lisa, niet haar echte naam, werd niet geloofd door de politie. Ze zou de verkrachtingen en het verhaal van de bevalling volgens de politie uit haar duim hebben gezogen. Case closed.
In recent years, this issue came back into public attention after several radio broadcasts by an investigative program called Argos. These broadcasts started in 2018.
Snap je als mensen zeggen, ja dag,
ja,
dit is
want
volslagen onzin?
Mijn eerste reflex was ook, ja dag, dit is volslagen onzin. Hier ga ik niet aan beginnen en hier geloof ik niks van. Maar als 140 mensen je iets vertellen, zelfs al is dat onzin, dan ben ik wel nieuwsgierig waar die onzin vandaan komt.
The testimony showed a lot of similarities. They were very detailed and they had the same details about locations, names of perpetrators, including violence, sexual abuse, torture, and also ritualistic aspects like ceremonies or specific symbols. And also forensic evidence was found that supported parts of these testimonies. These reports caused public outrage and forced the politicians to respond, whether they were genuinely shocked or just felt the pressure to act, they had to act.
Er zou geen bewijs zijn dat het verhaal van Lisa ondersteunde. Maar dat bewijs was er wel. Een bedrijfsrecherchebureau trof kinderporno aan op de laptop van de vader. Meerdere gynaecologen die Lisa medisch onderzochten hebben in officiële verklaringen met absolute zekerheid kunnen vaststellen dat zij inderdaad zwanger is geweest en is bevallen van een baby. In trauma gespecialiseerde therapeuten van de GGZ die Lisa onderzochten, die constateerden dat aan alle signalen van zwaar traumatisch seksueel misbruik was voldaan. En journalisten van het VPRO-programma Argos toonden aan dat het politiedossier bol stond van de ongerijmdheden en dat er met bewijsmateriaal geknoeid was.
After these shocking reports, the Dutch parliament reacted and agreed that a serious investigation was absolutely necessary. In 2020, the parliament voted for an independent investigation into the nature and skill of organized sadistic abuse of children in the Netherlands. The motion specifically called for including the experiences of the victims, survivors and therapists so that these findings could help in effectively identifying and dismantling the abuse networks. So the goal was not only to understand what is happening, but also to help to dismantle these abuse networks. After the parliament voted for an investigation, the Minister of Justice set up a special committee called the Hendricks Committee to carry out the research. But there were huge problems from the beginning. This committee was under the full control of the Minister of Justice. It was the minister himself who selected all the people in the committee. He was also allowed to fire all of them. He had total control over the process and he had the power to approve or block all important decisions. This was especially problematic because some victims accused high-level officials from the Ministry of Justice or from institutions related to the Ministry of Justice, such as the judiciary, the public prosecution, the police, of being involved in these abuse networks. So the victims were asked to testify before a committee, while the Ministry of Justice had the total control over this committee, while knowing that high-ranking officials from that same ministry had been accused of being involved in the abuse networks.
En als voorzitter van die commissie benoemde de minister nota bene Jan Hendricks. Iemand die er publiekelijk in de media voor pleit om het bezit van kinderporno te legaliseren, zodat pedofielen zich onder andere wat meer geaccepteerd zouden gaan voelen. Hoe verzin je het om een onderzoek naar pedonetwerken te laten plaatsvinden door iemand die sympathiseert met pedofielen?
Many victims, survivors and therapists refused to participate because they had no trust at all in the independence of the investigation.
De slachtoffers die geven herhaaldelijk aan dat juist ook hooggeplaatste ambtenaren van dat ministerie van Justitie betrokken zouden zijn bij dit fenomeen. En om die reden is het onderzoek op voorhand al niet onafhankelijk.
So as a result, most victims who could have provided crucial information, they were not even heard. This allowed the authorities to avoid hearing the full truth and make sure that many important facts never came to light. Many victims and therapists were not even heard. Testimonies were not properly investigated. Serious accusations, including the involvement of high-ranking officials and ritual aspects, were simply ignored. And even evidence, forensic evidence that supported parts of the testimonies was kept out of the report. Instead, the committee focused on a theoretical debate about reliability of memories without any solid scientific basis and without the parliament having asked for that. From the moment I saw how this investigation was being organized, I directly raised serious concerns about how the government was handling this.
I immediately called attention to the lack of independence and the many other flaws in the way the committee was organized.
Dan geef ik de minister van Justitie en Veiligheid het woord.
Voorzitter, ik begin met een ordepunt. Voordat ik op iets inga van uw Kamer. Er is gezegd door de heer Van Meijeren dat hoge ambtenaren van mijn ministerie worden beschuldigd van betrokkenheid bij ernstige zedenmisdrijven. En ik wil echt voor het eind van dit half uur naam, paard en weet ik veel die dingen heten. En dat ook gesubstantieerd hebben. Want ik moet echt zeggen, er zijn grenzen. Ik heb een paar keer het moeten opnemen voor ambtenaren van mij die werkelijk niets kwaads hadden gedaan. En buitengewoon onaangename dingen naar hun hoofd geslingerd kregen in dit gebouw. Dit accepteer ik niet. Dat zeg ik tegen de hele Kamer. Echt, ik accepteer het gewoon niet. Dus ik weet niet hoe we dat gaan oplossen, want ik geloof dat u straks nog een debat met mij heeft. Maar ik vind dit in een rechtsstaat, ik zie dat iedereen rustig blijft zitten. Ik vind het schunnig.
Er wordt weliswaar bevestigd dat georganiseerd sadistisch misbruik van minderjarigen bestaat. Maar dat wisten we al, dat werd al geconstateerd in die motie. Maar de aard van deze netwerken en de omvang daarvan, die zijn überhaupt niet onderzocht. De commissie Hendricks heeft naar eigen zeggen niet eens gestreefd naar waarheidsvinding, heeft ten onrechte beweerd dat er geen bewijs bestaat dat de slachtofferverklaringen zou ondersteunen en er is geen enkele rekening gehouden met de mogelijkheid dat ook hooggeplaatsten betrokken zijn bij die dadennetwerken. Terwijl juist die vraag of er ook hooggeplaatsten bij betrokken zijn zo essentieel is. Step by step, more and more people become aware that this investigation was simply not independent. It was a cover-up system.
Between 2012 and 2024, last year the number of trafficked children, child trafficking has tripled from 1.3 million to 3 million. We never know how accurate these statistics are, but the fact that 3 million children are trafficked worldwide every year, that alone is like, hello, that's huge.
I've passed details of people who are engaged in child trafficking into the UK. Names of all those. They've gone to the government. Nobody wants to act. Nobody wants to act about it.
How big is this?
It's big.
How many?
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
And so they're taking these children to who knows where, and they're doing who knows what to them.
Well, I'm told that they use them in the sex trade for about 3 years, and then they're worn out, and then they organ harvest them.
Wereld sta op, gaat onderzoeken. Organenhandel. Kinderen. Hoor je niemand over. Niemand doet wat. Die satanisten, fuck ze. Dat is nog maar een klein zielig groepje. Organenhandel, wereldwijd.
We know that in a lot of Western countries, the child protection services or youth care system, these services are hijacked or used by people within the network to take children out of their family. And of course, the most vulnerable families and children are subjected to this. So single parent families, families where the parent or one of the parents is addicted, families where there are a lot of financial problems. And it's difficult because it's not a black and white story, because if you talk to social workers, you hear their stories. There are situations where the children need to be brought into safety because they're not safe within the family that they grow up in. Despite the fact that we are a very small country, we are the #1 country that hosts child pornography. 83% of the child pornography is hosted from Dutch servers.
The networks that control the Netherlands will be structured in exactly the same way as the cult globally is structured.
In the Netherlands, we had a big scandal called the toeslagen affaire, and it was parents of a certain ethnicity, believe it or not, were accused of fraud of the tax and benefit system. And because of that and the financial problems that derived from that, the children were taken into state custody. And so the parents lost their children. Now that false accusation of tax and benefit fraud was acknowledged by the tax revenue services, but the children were never brought back home. So there were over 2,000 children that were taken into state custody, and of those 2,000, 400 children died. And no one knows what happened to these children. In fact, they changed the last name of these children so that parents could no longer trace them.
Many people believe that countries like the Netherlands are strong democracies that protect victims and uphold justice. But sadly, this is not true. When powerful interests are involved, even in my country, institutions turn out to be corrupt, investigations are being blocked, and victims are being left to their own devices.
A year later, new witnesses come forward to the police who identify the boy again. After the German police send out an emergency alert, the Dutch police finally step in and set up an investigation team. The main goal is bringing the missing boy to the surface. Detectives in this crisis team also confirm the earlier reports. They repeatedly report having spotted, recognized and identified the boy at the previously mentioned locations and in the company of the suspects named in earlier witness statements. It is noted that the missing boy is indeed in the hands of a child porn network. The investigation team tries to get permission from higher authorities to intervene and rescue him from this extremely dangerous situation.
Target gespot. Toestemming om in te grijpen?
Negative. That permission never comes. Later, it turns out the police report where all of this was described and proven has accidentally been deleted while transferring to a new administration system. The boy slips through the fingers of justice. Again.
Waarom bestaat het journaal niet meer? Dat is een pure technische fout. Het is vanuit het ene systeem in het andere systeem gegaan. Het was een computersysteem en dus overschreven. Het journaal bestaat niet meer? Nee. Nee.
Well, the first step is to feel the pain. That if you rush through and don't allow yourself to recognize how much harm there's been, it's kind of a shortcut. But once you've forgiven it, you have to, most people have some kind of either faith and belief in something bigger. You have to have that. 2, you have to be able to calm yourself down.
Post-traumatic growth is a term that was developed by 2 psychologists, Tedeschi and Calhoun. Could also mean that you say to yourself, whatever happened to me, I will do everything that is in my power to not repeat the cycle. I always speak about the triangle of self-regulation, co-regulation, and context regulation as a foundation, the triangle as a foundation of regaining our fire, regaining our power, regaining our soul. Self-regulation refers to what we can do ourselves to recover. Co-regulation refers to what others can do for you or what we can do for others. And that's a very important dimension. And then there's also the context. It's easier when you're willing to self-regulate, and there's a bunch of co-regulating others, and there's also a very beautiful context. I'm thinking about a little story of a father who he has two sons, and he was an alcoholic. The father was an alcoholic, and he had also aggression issues. And one son also became an addict and an aggressor, and the other son became a very successful and loving father. And there was at some point an interview with both of them, and the question was, how come? Your father an alcoholic and an aggressor, and two different situations. What happened? Why did you become an alcoholic and also an aggressor? And he said, yeah, my father was an alcoholic and an aggressor. And the other son answered, yeah, my father was an alcoholic and aggressor. That's why I became successful.
I strongly believe that as more people become aware and refuse to look away, the pressure on the corrupt system will increase and the truth will eventually conquer.
They are all people who do not have the ability to empathize with the victims of their actions.
They know they're having an effect on the subconscious without the conscious even being aware of it. And there was a time in Britain, I was involved with this in the 1990s, where it had started to come out, and there were brave people who were speaking out, and the lid was smacked on it. And not everyone that was involved in that, snuffing it out, would be a paedophile, but they would be answerable to the cult and know the consequences of not doing whatever they were told. Of course, the only way to stop it is to expose it, but that's going to take, and does take, a lot of determination and people who care more about the kids than they care about the consequences.
Justice is done something by the system. That's something that's done by society. Forgiveness is something you do on a very personal level. It's not something that can be imposed on, certainly not on the victims or the survivors, but it can help people to set themselves free. Because in the end, you do it as for yourself. You can use forgiveness and compassion for yourself, not to get stuck in the lower vibration emotions. It took me years, maybe 10 years or so, to get to that point where I could feel compassion, even for perpetrators. And that's a really strange concept, because at first you're angry, I was very focused on justice. But it also brings you down. I mean, I always felt after I had dealt with a certain shocking story that I had to recover from it. I can imagine that a perpetrator is brought to justice. I can feel the tragedy of their lives, how they were lured in as a child into the network, abused as a very young child. You can go back to that image.
People that are in a constant state of anger tend to have more issues with their hearts, with their different organs. When you're cherishing a state of unforgiveness, consciously or subconsciously, you're hurting yourself. So the question is forgiveness important? Well, according to me and according to a lot of studies, it's very important. But you don't have to like the person. I always say that forgiveness should not be the first step. It should be the outcome of a process, but it should not be your goal. Your goal is to heal yourself and to stop repeating the violence onto yourself, because when people are abused, they tend to abuse themselves. They tend to develop illnesses such as DID, also depression, psychosis, addictions. They tend to hurt themselves, do self-harming. We are here on Earth to heal, because we're not working on ourselves on a deeper level, and we're mostly busy with dealing daily stress and becoming successful. We tend to forget. Instead of evolving, we repeat. When we want to reconnect with that happened to us, and we are enabling ourselves to feel, and we are creating an environment around us that also supports that, then we can start feeling and healing. 80% of our lives are created through the unconscious process. But the perpetrator, of course, that cannot stop, is deeply wounded, but is also deeply responsible.
This story is not made up. It really happened. It has been carefully reconstructed using information from articles, investigative reports, and personal testimonies gathered over the course of many years. The boy in this film lived in Berlin, Germany. He disappeared on July 24th, 1993. Several testimonies say he was abused by multiple men in horrific ways on a sailboat in the summer of 1994. The story goes that he died on the boat while being the victim of torture in a snuff movie. Several witnesses say a high-profile Dutch government official was on board during the filming of that movie. It has been stated that the boy's dishonored body was thrown overboard in open water in the Netherlands. The boy's remains have never been found. The boy in this film was only 13 years old when he allegedly died. His name was Manuel Schatwald.
There were investigative journalists that worked on the case for over 10 years.
I see this case as one of many deeply disturbing examples that show how far these networks may reach and how serious the consequences are for the victims.
Observatieteam heeft gisteravond gereden. Ze herkenden Manuel Schatwald als een van de jongens die bij Lothar was.
Wat is uw reactie daarop? Nou, dat is naar alle waarschijnlijkheid niet de Manuel Schatwald geweest. Hoe weet u dat zo zeker? Omdat het niet ondersteund is door andere getuigen. Er zijn diverse mensen die denken Manuel gezien te hebben. Hij had nog een algemeen, althans in dat circuit voorkomend algemeen, een vaker voorkomend uiterlijk, laat ik het zo zeggen.
Maar weet u het zeker dat hij het niet was?
Ik ben geen helderziende, maar wij gaan er voorlopig vanuit dat hij het niet was.
There were witness testimonies, forensic indications, and even signs of involvement of very powerful people. But sadly, as in other cases, we see a pattern of authorities failing to follow up on crucial leads, allowing many unanswered questions to remain.
And that's why films like this are so important and so few in number, but so important.
This boy represents so much. It's not because you're not alive anymore. You're not capable of cultivating post-traumatic growth. That we, that are still breathing, should not take the responsibility and do the work for him. So that's my motivation to continue the work of those who could not continue their work.
This film is dedicated to all children who have been and still are victimized by local, national, international and global networks that traffic, abuse and torture children in the most horrific ways imaginable. Children of all ages, from their earliest stage in the womb to young adulthood. With this film, we give the boy back his voice. We told his story so he and all victims of organized abuse throughout history will never be forgotten, and their stories come back to the surface.